Are you afraid of kanji? Not sure where to start? Or just can't read Japanese? Well, I've got just the thing for you. This sounds like an infomercial. In this video, I'm going to give you some resources and what I use to actually study and read Japanese. There are so many ways to do this, and I'm going to give you the ways that I find are actually enjoyable, because that's what we want when we're trying to study a language. We don't want it to be all so boring. You could read from NHK News, that easy Japanese text that they have every day, but it's not the most exciting, even though it is very useful, and I do recommend you try reading it because it's very short and you will pick up new words very quickly. However, we also need some other ways to learn Japanese that's a little more exciting. When it comes to reading things online, one of the best extensions you can have while looking at Japanese sites is this extension 1010 Japanese Reader. So it has a lot of different features available. JLBT, if you're studying for that, gives you dictionary information on all sorts of different things. It is so useful, especially if you just look at Japanese websites and need to understand and translate some of the text very efficiently. Obviously, you could just use Google Translate, but it's not always the most accurate. And how 1010 Japanese Reader works is you can actually hover over the text and get the exact words, get the grammar points figured out as well. It makes it so much more digestible, and you can actually understand what it means rather than just having that translated text in front of you. So you can practice your Japanese reading and learn some new words along the way. If you actually want to read manga, I recommend looking through the Japanese sites that give you access to manga to purchase, but also a lot of these sites like Bookwalker, which is very good, and it's actually my preferred one, gives you access to, and if we look at this, free manga to read. So a lot of these are new editions, or they're going through promotions where they want to advertise it. So you'll have like the first 8 are free, the first chapter is free, this one's like the first 3 volumes. A lot of these volumes are free for a limited time or permanently. You can go through here, you can select one and read through it. And the nice thing about Bookwalker is that you can actually zoom in if you just double click there. Let's say we don't understand this block of text here. So even though we have, our Furigana there, we're still finding some of this text a little difficult, right? So the next application comes into play, because you can see that I can't just hover over it. I can't scan using my plugin that I just talked about that I love. So that's the one downside of trying to read manga, is that you can't use that nifty plugin that tells you all the information as soon as you hover over it. So we're gonna have to do a little extra work, but it's actually not that bad. I'm going to tell you to download now the game to text application. I'm going to execute that file, and this is what pops up once I've downloaded it. You'll get a folder and you'll have this application available in that folder. So you boot that up and we can select our application here. So here's all my browsers open. So we're reading Death Note, the first one here. So we're going to select that one. So it pops out here. So we have this clear box here and we want to read this. So we go to game to text. It's nice because you can just quickly switch right on top there. So it pops up once you get the application open. And now what we can do is go down to settings. Since we're reading manga, it's all vertical text. So as long as you have the Tesseract engine selected, any of these 3, you can select detect vertical text. And so now it will recognize that. And we can, check our translation. So it operates off of, Google Translate here, but also you can do DeepL Translate. But I find Google Translate works very well. And you can even connect it to Anki if that's what you use to help you study new words. But we have this now set up, so if we just close this, we can now select anywhere. So we can drag a box here and it'll pop up. So it's not always the most accurate, so we see there it didn't really detect it. So sometimes what you have to do is just break it down line by line. So soko ni, and it did that just fine. Soko ni is very simple. So let's go to some kanji here. So we'll select all of this, and we'll try and avoid that furigana, although it normally doesn't pick it up. And so now if we check here, so we have namae o, so that's name, and yep, that's written there. Got that correct. Kakareta, Yep, so that's the passive form of writing. And we can see that 1010 reader is actually telling us that too. So it says it's in the passive form, which is really nice. And also the past form, indicated by that top right there. So it did a really good job of recognizing on the first try. Sometimes you do have to select again. Let's see if we can read this just fine. Yep, that also worked as well. And yeah, so it's working very well. Even recognizes the little accents. So some text it does really well at recognizing, and others you might have to just keep kind of selecting it. But if you need to, you can go in and manually change it here. And the nice thing about Manga is that it has that fairy down a lot of the times, so you can manually input it with your computer. And I recommend you get a ability to change typing and get used to typing in Japanese. That will save you so much effort. It'll also help you in learning Japanese by practicing typing in Japanese. So Game the Text is very, very useful for reading manga for plain visual novel games, because you can select it for any game application or any application you have open. A lot of times those games though, just like a normal game, might have text that's not always the clearest. You really need a clean white background or clean black background with white text, to be able to read kanji. And as long as those kanji aren't super stylized, it does a really good job of picking up the information. Now let's move on to other sites. So we also have Shonen Jump Plus. So this is a very good site as well. If you go to One Piece's, main website here, onepiece.com. They do have previews of all of these, but obviously you probably don't just want to read a preview, you probably want to read the actual thing. So you could, if you feel like purchasing a volume, you can do that. So you can go in here and purchase the volume for digital use. And that'll take you to this site. So this is another site where they sell manga, so Zabrak Comic, and you can purchase that here. Or you can find other means to read your novels. As long as you have access to it online, it's very easy to use with your other applications. So the reason why I suggest that you should read online and read manga is that manga can provide a context for what you're reading. If you're trying to read like from a book, from a normal novel, you're gonna get bogged down. It's gonna be a nightmare. But with manga, you have the context with the picture there. So you can decipher it even if you can't necessarily translate every single word. You can understand the context that you're going in, what's happening in the story. And even if you don't understand everything, then you can still enjoy the story, right? And so you're enjoying reading while learning or recognizing or getting familiar with Japanese. It's very useful to learn Japanese. You'll get more familiar with reading, you'll get faster, you'll pick up more words. You'll be surprised by how many words you actually pick up. And I think it's because you have that visual element as well to connect it. And you have that memory of, okay, I'm reading something that I enjoy. I just saw this really cool fight scene. They were talking about this during this scene, and it just really stuck with me because the visuals are also there. So when you have that combination of visuals, you know how the word is said, you can actually understand the words a lot better and also understand how they're used in certain situations as well. Whereas if you're trying to read a novel or trying to read a book with a sentence in it, it might not always provide the same kind of context that you would expect. You can get dialogue that will help you with that context, but even then, it might not stick as well as having a picture available to you. And that's really how we learn when we first start out, right? We have picture books, big old picture books with birds, with animals, with weird, wacky things like Dr. Seuss, and we learn those words while looking at those pictures, and they stick a lot more when we're younger. So I recommend using manga with that picture aspect focus so that you can get the context. You can still understand what's happening in the story for the most part, even if you don't understand every word. So then the next thing I want to talk about is video games. Now, video games are not going to use these same resources unless you're using visual novels as your means to learn. A lot of times, the video games that you're playing, the text just isn't good enough or doesn't have the right background as visual novels do, because visual novels are meant to be read, right? So they're a lot more clear, they're a lot easier to read, maybe even less jargon text to confuse the system. So in general, if you're trying to use game to text, it works best for video game novels. I think also Animal Crossing might be pretty good. But yeah, so we want to learn from video games. So our best bet now is to have just the resources available to us. We could have our laptop set up, and we can have, our dictionary ready. We could have our translation software ready and available. The thing I recommend you do is to have your phone also set so that you can quickly bring it up, use your Google Translate with the lens feature, and you're going to be able to translate it and at least get the text that you need to. Certain games will actually have the furigana, so that it's a lot easier to read in general, so you can just look up the word. But if it's kanji and there is no furigana, then you can use Google Translate to help you figure out what that furigana is. So the main thing to focus on here is to just enjoy the game and look at the more common words set up here during your game. So what I do is I combined it with my handy dandy Japanese app. So we can actually just make lists, and I have one actually for a lot of things. Yeah, right down here is Zelda in reverse text. So I have my own, and I think I picked up, 170 entries. A lot of words you can pick up very quickly during your games, and it's important to remember not to focus on every single word, right? You just want to basically understand the gist of what you're reading so that you can still enjoy it, still learn something, but then continue on and actually play the game, right? So that's our main objective, is to have fun while learning Japanese. With games in particular, I recommend playing on the Switch. Other consoles probably could work too, or other applications, depending on how you set it. So for example, I also play Omori, and I have a playthrough, part playthrough of Omori. You can actually set games to be Japanese in Steam, depending on if the game even has that Japanese language available to it. But I recommend Switch because all of those games are pretty much, have the Japanese language, right? So you can set your console to be Japanese, just go into the game, and there you go, voila, it's in Japanese. So very useful function. I've played Fire Emblem in Japanese, I've played Legend of Zelda in Japanese, Persona in Japanese, all these games that I have already, and I don't have to just go out there and buy something else. The Switch is very handy in learning the Japanese language, and I recommend, if you have one, to make use of it. Hopefully that helps everyone, and if you did enjoy this video, if you learned something, it really mean a lot if you supported this channel and giving that a like, subscribe. Stay tuned if you want more Japanese culture, travel, language learning, and if you want to hang out sometime, I also stream on Twitch, so you can join me there as well. I'll put the link down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.